equations in one variable. This is already part 2 of a series of videos introducing solving variables in linear equations. In this video, we'll try to demonstrate how the multiplication and division properties of equality can be used to solve for variables. But before we continue, it is assumed that you have a mastery of combining signed numbers and similar terms, as well as properties of equality, particularly the addition and subtraction property, as well as the law of transposition, all discussed in part 1 of this tutorial series. Don't worry though, we'll still try to explain some previous topics naman as we go along. You can click the links in the description below to go to specific parts of this video, although I highly recommend watching every example as you may learn something from each one of them. Let's recall first the multiplication property of equality. Now, what does it say again? According to this, for A, B, and C, where all of these are elements of the set of real numbers, if A were equal to B, then A times C is equal to B times C. Now, what does this practically mean? It means multiplying same values to both sides of an equation will result to an equality pa rin. Now, make sure you know C should not be equal to 0. Why is that so? Because if C were equal to 0, whether A is equal to B or not, by multiplying 0, they will become equal, right? Even unequal values become equal when multiplied by 0. So don't multiply by 0. Okay, so again, C can be any number as long as it's not equal to 0. Now, replacing C with, for example, a fraction 1/2. We know that if A were equal to B, then A times C is equal to B times C. Well, that's from the multiplication of equality. But substituting 1/2 to C, we now have A times 1/2 and B times 1/2. Simplifying, we know that A has a denominator equal to 1 and B has a denominator equal to 1 as well. Multiplying the numerators, we have A times 1 is equal to A and the denominators 2. Multiplying the right side, we have B times 1 is B and the denominators 1 times 2 is 2. Now, what's the implication of this? This means that when you divide both the left and right side by a number, in this case 2, the left side and the right side would still be equal. Now, from this investigation, we now have another property of equality, and that's the division property of equality. Now, what is this property saying? According to this, for real numbers A, B, and C, if A were equal to B, then A divided by C is equal to B divided by C, again where C is not equal to 0. Now, what does this mean? Dividing the same value to both sides of an equation will result to an equality pa rin. Now, again, warning, C, the denominator, should not be 0. Of course, we know that that is the case because if C were 0, the left side and right side will be undefined. So again, implication, whether you multiply or divide, as long as you divide or multiply to both sides of the equation and then these numbers are equal, the left side would still be equal to the right side of the equation. Now we're ready to use these properties in solving for variables in linear equations. Now let's try to solve for x in these examples. Example number 1, we're asked to solve negative 16x is equal to 96. Recall, our aim when solving for x is to isolate x on one side of the equation. Now, looking at our left side of the equation here, as you can see, together with x is istorbong negative 16. We don't want negative 16 there. Now, we have a tendency to do it this way. Sir, negative 16. Therefore, recall, sir, di ba we can transpose? Okay, let's try and do that. Let's say x is left on the left side because we move from the left to the right yung negative 16. So copy 96. Since we move negative 16 from one side to the other, recall transposition, this now will become plus. Minus, then it becomes plus when moved. Therefore, we have plus 16. Now we simplify the right side. 96 plus 16 is 112. If you check this, unfortunately, is a wrong answer. Now, What happened? Why is this a wrong answer? Take note, our aim or the key here is to counteract the operation. What did we do here? We know that transposition is the shortcut of the addition and subtraction properties. The question is, does plus or minus connect negative 16 and x? Unfortunately not. We should know and be aware that what connects them is multiplication. So you don't counteract multiplication by transposition, because again, transposition is the shortcut or counteracting plus or minus. So how do we counteract multiplication then? You divide. That's the opposite of multiplication. So doing that, let me copy. Negative 16x is equal to 96. Now, what you want to do, this is connected by multiplication. To counteract, we do is divide by negative 16, both sides of the equation. Okay, simplifying, we know that negative 16 divided by 16 can be cancelled, therefore leaving just x on the left side. And on the right side, we divide. Signs first, positive divided by negative is negative. 96 divided by 16 is 6. Therefore, the final answer should be negative 6. You can check if you want. Negative 16 times negative 6 is positive 96. Our answer must be correct. So again, warning, you cannot transpose when you are given multiplication, just like what we're doing here. You only transpose if what connects the variable and the number you want to remove is connected by addition or subtraction. Let's try to solve for x in number 2. We are given 5 is equal to negative x. Now, you might ask me, Sir, if we want to isolate x on one side of the equation, isn't x isolated already? Di ba? Mag-isa na lang niya sa right side? Unfortunately not, because take note, meron pa siyang kasamang negative. Negative x is different from x. So, how do we remove that negative sign then? Remember a very important property. It's the negative 1 property of multiplication. It tells us that when you have a negative before a variable, it actually has a numerical coefficient. And that numerical coefficient is negative 1. Remember that? So negative here means a numerical coefficient of negative 1, and then copy x. And then copy 5 on the left side. Now, how do we isolate x this time? Take note again, you should counteract the operation. What connects negative 1 and x ba? They are connected by multiplication. So to counteract that multiplication, we have to divide by negative 1. You did that to the right side. Para fair, equal pa rin, dapat you do that to the left side as well. Now, anong mangyayari? Negative 1 divided by negative 1 cancel, leaving just x on the right side. And on the left side, simplify. Positive divided by negative, it's negative. 5 divided by 1 is 5. Therefore, we have isolated x, and x is equal to negative 5. Let's have another way of solving the same problem in number 2. Now, our aim is to remove this negative sign here. Now, take note, paano na nga matatanggal ang isang negative sign? We can think of transposition, correct? Because if we transpose negative x to the other side, this negative will now become positive, which is our aim. However, you might say, Sir, di ba nagkamali tayo kanina? We transposed negative 16 here. Yes, the reason for that is we did not transpose the whole thing. We transposed negative 16 only, which is incorrect. But you can use transposition if we include the whole term. Now, doing that, anong mangyayari? Let me write first our equal sign here. Negative x, when transposed, will now become, change the sign, it will now become plus. And then x, yay! Wala na yung istorbong negative. However, 5 is still there. And bigger problem, Sir, anong natira sa kanan? Eh di wala. Okay, so we can put 0 there. Now, can you find a way to isolate finally ang x na yan? What connects x and 5 It's the addition operation. What counteracts the addition operation? Opposite of that is, we know of course, it's minus. So what we can do, instead of subtracting minus 5 here and minus 5 here, we can do the shortcut of addition and subtraction properties of equality. We transpose 5. So we move 5 from the left to the right. Therefore, isolating x only. And then here, the sign of 5 is positive. Therefore, to counteract that, this will now become negative 5. Which brings us to the same value here. X is equal to negative 5. You might say, Sir, pareho ba yan? Remember the symmetric property of equality? When you flip their position, they are the same. So this is another way of doing this. Now, why not try to transpose faster? Meaning, let me copy, 5 is negative x. Sir, can we do simultaneous transposing? Yes, you can. You move this to the left side. You move this to the right side. So you now have opposite of negative x. This will now become positive. Opposite of 5, when you transpose, it will now become negative. You now get the same answer as what we did previously. So far, we answered this problem using two ways. First is by division property of equations. Divide both sides by negative 1. And another is by transposing the whole term. Take note, you can transpose whole terms, even variables. Therefore, having the same answer. Now, last, let me show you another way. Is there a way to remove this negative sign aside from dividing and transposing? What we can do is, why not try to multiply both sides by negative 1? Talaga? We can multiply both sides by negative 1? Yes, of course. Using the multiplication property of equations. Multiply negative 1 to both sides. Therefore, we now have negative x times negative 1 is positive x. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. So there's another way of solving. As you can see, there are many ways of solving as long as you follow these rules and follow them correctly, then you should have the same answer. Let's answer some more problems. Let's look at example number 3. We're solving x here in x over 5 equals negative 7. Now recall, to isolate x because we don't want itong istorbong 5 dito, let's look at the operation that connects x and 5. Looking at this, the operation is division. And to remove that, let's counteract division. And how do you counteract division? Multiplication. So copy natin muna, x over 5. To counteract division, let's multiply this by 5. Later, we know that we can cancel these 5, therefore leaving just x. However, you did that to the left side, you also do that to the right para equal according to the multiplication property. Now, what we can do is simplify both sides. Cancel 5, leaving just x. And negative 7 times 5 is negative 35. Therefore, we now have the answer. Checking, we have negative 35. Substitute x here just to be sure. Negative 35 divided by 5 is really negative 7. Our answer must be correct. Now, let's look at example number 4. We have negative 3/5 m equals 6. Now, what makes this different is we now have two numbers here. One in the numerator and another in the denominator. We want to remove the whole negative 3/5. To remove that, let's look at them separately. Let me copy first negative 3/5 and then copy m. Looking at negative 3 and m, what connects them is, we know multiplication. We want to counteract that multiplication. To do that, let's divide this by negative 3 so that we know we can cancel them later. However, we did that on the left side. What we need to do is do that on the right side as well. Divide by negative 3 para fair. Now, we're done with negative 3. How about 5? We know that we can extend this. Therefore, we are dividing m and 5. To counteract division, we multiply. So, multiply both sides by 5, knowing that later we can cancel them. But you did that to the left side. You should also do that to the right. Therefore, in effect, if we really want to remove negative 3/5, multiply both sides by 5 over negative 3. Teka, does this look familiar? Yes, we know that 5 over negative 3 together is the reciprocal of negative 3/5. This is the same thing as the law of cancellation for multiplication. When you multiply the multiplicative inverse of a numerical coefficient, we can cancel them, therefore leaving just m on one side. Now, simplifying this one, multiplying the numerators, 6 times 5 is 30 over negative 3 because the denominator of this is 1. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. In the end, simplifying further, m is 30 divided by negative 3, which is negative 10. So that's how we solve for the value of m. Counteract division by multiplication. Counteract multiplication by division. Or, pwede rin, you simply multiply by the reciprocal of the numerical coefficient. So you're now ready for some exercises. Solve for the variable in the following equations, making sure to check your answer by substitution kahit mentally lang. You can use any of the methods we presented. Pause this video now to try them. Kaya yan! Go! Here are the answers. You may have used a different method, but we should have the same answer no matter what. I hope you got them. Here are some more exercises. Solve for the variable in the following equations. You can use any of the methods again we just presented. Pause this video now to try them. Kaya yan! Go! Here are the answers. Did we use the same method? I hope nakuha nyo lahat yan. Transposition is the shortcut for the addition and subtraction properties. We now discuss the shortcut for the multiplication and division properties, and that is cross multiplication. Now, what can we do with cross multiplication? If you have variables a, b, c, d, and x, where all of these are real numbers, the quantity a over b times x is equal to c over d. Then x is equal to bc over ad, where all the variables a, b, c, d, and x are not equal to 0. Now, what does this mean? This means that given an equation between two fractions or expressions, meaning fraction on the left, fraction on the right, one can cross-multiply as seen above to simplify the equation or determine the value of a variable. Now, cross-multiplication means if we look at a on the left side here, it can cross the equal sign and be multiplied with d. Therefore, the denominator becomes a times d. Now, looking at b, it can also cross the equal sign multiplied by c, therefore, making the numerator b times c or bc. Therefore, isolating x, which is equal to bc over ad. Now, let's see how we derive that. Let me copy the equation above, where we have a fraction on the left, a over b, times x equals a fraction on the right, c over d. Now, if we want to isolate x, a over b is sort of your numerical coefficient. Remember, when we want to cancel using the law of cancellation for multiplication, we multiply that with the reciprocal of a over b, which is b over a. You do that to the left side, you also do that to the right using multiplication property. Now, simplifying the left side, a times b, the numerators are multiplied, therefore you have ab. On the denominator, b times a is ba, which we know we can cancel later. While on the right side, C times B, we set it up, D times A on the denominator. Now, simplifying further the left side, we only have X. While on the right side, let's arrange them alphabetically. C times B is the same thing as BC. D times A is the same thing as AD. In the end, we only have X equals BC over AD, which is what we have in the cross multiplication statement above. Let's go back to question number 5, which we just did earlier. Now we were asked to solve for X, and we did this by counteracting multiplication by 2, we divide by 2. We counteract division by 5, we multiply by 5. So in effect, we simply multiply by the reciprocal, canceling the constants, ending with just X here, and the answer is 25. Now let me call this method A, because what we can do now is have another method to solve the same problem. So copying 2/5 times X is equal to 10. Let's use cross multiplication this time to quickly isolate X. Now, according to cross multiplication, we don't want 2/5 here. We can remove 2 from the numerator and put it in the denominator. We can also move 5 from the denominator and put it in the numerator. In the end, we have isolated X quickly. And then, we multiply 5 times 10, that's what we may cross multiply, divided by the denominator 2 times, what's the denominator of 10 again? Of course, it's 1. So it's 2 times 1. Now, simplifying further, X then is 5 times 10, which is 50, divided by 2. Therefore, the answer is 25, which is the same as we solved earlier. However, we have a third way of solving. Of course, there might be other ways, but these are the most common. So let me copy 2/5 X again, and it's equal to 10. Notice, 2/5 is being multiplied by X. Therefore, if we want to counteract multiplication, what do? We divide. Therefore, what we can do this time is divide the whole thing by 2/5, thereby canceling everything. But we did that on the left side. We should also do the same on the right side according to the division property. Now we cancel both, so this will be canceled. Therefore, what we have left on the left side is just X. And on the right side, it's a little bit problematic, but nothing that we can answer. We know that 10 has a denominator equal to 1. How do we divide a fraction over another fraction again? We can rewrite it in horizontal form, but that would take too long. What we can do is do outer over inner. Naalala nyo pa ba to? Outer, the product, divided by the product of the inner. So in the end, it's 10 times 5. That's the outer. So let me set it up. 10 times 5. Divided by the product of the inner, 1 times 2. So we have 10 times 5, 50 divided by 2, 25. We have the same answer as previously solved using other methods. So it's up to you what method to use. Meron dyan yung iba favorite ang multiplying by the reciprocal. Yung iba naman prefer cross multiplication. Now yung iba, well, they're crazy enough to do this. But whatever you choose, you should arrive at the same answer. Here are exercises 6 and 7. Solve for the variable in the following equations. You can use any of the methods we presented, but I suggest you use cross multiplication for practice. Pause this video now to try them. Kaya yan! Go! Here are the answers. We solved using cross multiplication. Nakuha ba? Pero warning lang, in cross multiplication, you cross multiply only when you have an equal sign. You cannot cross multiply if there's no equal sign. Here are the last set of exercises. They will be discussed after you answer them. Pause this video now and answer. Kaya yan! Go! Let's answer number 8. We're asked to solve for X. Now, the problem here is, you might be confused on where to place this negative sign. Now, alam natin that negative can go either sa numerator or sa denominator. But you cannot place negative on both kasi negative divided by negative, magiging positive na, which is different from what we're given. So, you choose saan mo ilalagay yan, sa taas o sa baba, kahit saan. Let me try and decide to place that negative in the numerator. Well, that's just me. Bahala ka kung sa denominator mo ilalagay. In the end, you will have the same answer as we said. Now, we want to isolate x, cross multiply 3. Yung numerical coefficient na to is 1, you can cross multiply, but it's useless na. Ang gagawin mo na lang is yung denominator. So, cross multiply it to negative 5. So, we now have x is 3 times negative 5 all over 6. Simplifying, we now have 3/6 is 1/2. So, in the end, we have negative 5 over 2. That is the answer. Now, some of you might consider writing negative 2.5. Pwede rin, pero this is enough. Now, let's look at number 9. In number 9, our variable m is on the right side. And take note, you cannot solve whenever you're given a mixed number. So, convert this first to mixed number form. And to do that, we have to multiply 4 times 2, 8 plus 1 is 9. All over the denominator 4. But don't forget, we have a negative sign before it. Again, it doesn't matter whether you put this in the numerator or denominator. So we now have m over 8. Now, cross multiplication does not involve only from left to right. Pwede rin from right to left. As long as may equal sign, pwede nating i-cross multiply and leave only m on the right side. Huwag mo nang i-distribute yung 1. Now, we have m on the right side. On the left side, we multiply negative 9 times 8 and then all over 4. M, therefore, is 8 divided by 4. This one is 2. 2 times negative 9 is negative 18. So, you have M is equal to negative 18. Last, we have negative A over 4 is equal to negative 6. Now, let me try and do this two ways, just to show you it doesn't really matter where you place the negative sign. Let's solve it first with negative on top. We know, of course, that we have the negative 1 there as the numerical coefficient of A. Then over 4 is negative 6. Cross-multiplying, negative 1 to the right and 4 to the right as well, but in the numerator. So, on the left side, we only have A. On the right side, 4 times negative 6 when we cross-multiply, all over negative 1 times the denominator of this, which is 1. We don't need to write that. So in the end, A is negative divided by negative, positive. This will be cancelled. 4 times 6 is 24. So you have A is equal to 24. Now, let me try and solve it another way. What if I decide to place the negative sign in the denominator? Now, mas madali to actually because when you cross-multiply, you don't need to cross-multiply any other number. Unlike this one, pati negative 1 ibababa mo. Makakatipid ka sa time. So we have A. What is negative 4 times negative 6? Actually, you can immediately write the product 24, which is the same as this one. I hope nakuha niyo yung mga yan. Remember that there are many ways to arrive at the answer. In our next video, we would be using a combination of all properties of equality. Sama-sama na! See you next time! Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy solving!